just to get people logged on after their lunch and all of that good stuff. You want to stretch out or grab some water, we'll get started around 1:02 and see you then. For those that got on since I said so, we'll get started around 1:02. So talk to you in a minute. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining us. We have, hopefully you can see a slideshow up in front of you, as well as some smiling faces of Oregon Department of Energy staff. So we're here ahead of our formal rulemaking process on 2 new heat pump programs. And what we're gonna do today is walk through the 2 programs. Folks are welcome to raise hands or put questions in the chat at any point, and I will just ask those questions as makes sense or get people in to as makes sense. And then we have some questions for you at the end of our time together today. It's really important to us as we put the program together that we're hearing from folks in the community, folks who have expertise on these topics. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. So I'm going to move us through quickly, just a reminder about the Oregon Department of Energy and sort of where we fit into things when it comes to energy in Oregon. A lot of different agencies do a lot of different things. Our heat pump programs are an example of energy programs and activities at the bottom of what we do, but we also are using the other work that we do in order to pop these 2 programs up. Actually, while I'm on the Department of Energy slide, let me do this. I'll introduce myself. And I'll also ask Odo staff to say hello that are working on these heat pump programs. Just the ones with their cameras on is fine. Anybody who wants to say hi. My name is Christy Splitt, and I'm our government relations coordinator. And I should flag that we're very excited that we have staff coming on board specific to the heat pump programs very soon. And so I've been calling the crew you see today sort of a ragtag crew of folks that are working so that we can get these programs up and running so that they can be available to Oregonians. But you may not always see us when we're in the future, because we'll have new people coming in and being the ones that you'll be interacting with more. So I'll pass things on to James, Stephanie, and Doug, who are the leads in putting the program together, and then Patricia, Michael, and Pondian.
Hi, thanks, Christy. James Kogel here, policy analyst for the program, and also will be the administrative rules coordinator for as we go through drafting these program rules. I'll hand over to Stephanie.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stephanie Cruz. I'm a facilities engineer with our energy efficiency and conservation section. And I have been following these programs from when they were legislative concepts, and will be providing technical support to the programs going forward.
I'm Doug Bear. I'm the Senior Incentives Analyst in the Wildfire Program, and I am currently working on issuing incentives for heat pumps under that Wildfire Program.
Hi, I'm Patricia Phillips. I'm the admin assistant here. I'm also here to help make sure that you have access to your to the program to the WebEx. And if you have any issues, please put them into the please make a comment in the chat so we can help you out. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pandian Krishnaswamy. I'm managing the heat pump programs. I'll pass it on to Michael.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. Michael Williams, Assistant Director for Central Services. This team.
We're having a little bit of trouble with sound, and I think it's because we have somebody off mute. Cheney, if you can hear me, it'd be great if you could mute yourself. So I think we're getting feedback. And we're trying to figure out if we can mute you on our end. I think that's where it's coming from. Let's see, maybe Patricia, you might also mute yourself. See if we can figure it out what's going on with the sound. Oh, great. Thanks, Cheney. We can't see that you're on mute, but I'm glad that you are on your end. Thank you for taking care of that. Awesome. I think it was maybe Patricia. Once we got her muted, it seems like it cleared up. You never know who it is that has the weird echo in their house or something. Thank you. All right, so I'll move us on. We use WebEx for our public meetings here at the Department of Energy. And so I know that it's not always the most common. We have no issues with it, but we just like to make sure folks have a chance to get familiar with it before we get started, since we do use chat and hand raised in order to have the conversation here today. So you'll see on here that in the bottom corner, you should be able to see the chat, or at least the chat button, in order to open up the chat. You can also see the smiley face is what you click on, and then the raise hand is right at the top. We kind of joke the raised hand looks like a raised fist, so look for that icon, and that's the one that you need to raise your hand so that we can get you in the queue to ask questions or answer questions or make comments when the time comes. And I'll, if anybody has any questions about the WebEx format or anything, go ahead in the chat and I will go ahead and handle those first. But I will move us on for the time being. So Senate Bill 1536 passed during the February legislative session this year. Some of you might have been involved in the passage of that particular bill. We really tried to invite everybody that was part of a really large coalition that worked on this bill together. And the bill comes from essentially the heat dome event from last June, in which around 100 Oregonians died. Most of them died in their own homes, and most of them were renters. And so the bill deals with a lot of provisions that we are not going to talk specifically about today, but that are designed to protect renters or allow renters more choices when it comes to cooling, as well as providing an emergency air conditioner deployment program, a community cooling spaces program administered through the Energy Trust of Oregon. We got a couple of different tasks handed to us. We're doing a study on cooling needs and affordable housing. We also are helping with that Energy Trust program I mentioned. But the two biggest programs that were handed our way are these two heat pump incentive programs that will be the topic of our conversation today. One of them is called the Community Heat Pump Deployment Program. I'll talk about that one first. And the other is called the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program. I do want to make a note that the Inflation Reduction Act passed since February and includes incentive programs for heat pumps, as well as federal tax credits to support energy efficiency upgrades in homes. And we know that this exists, and we know that it'll be a helpful tool for folks that are doing work on their homes. I just want to note that the incentive programs laid out in the Inflation Reduction Act, we don't really know when we'll get the details for those programs from the U.S. Department of Energy. The bill itself doesn't have a lot of detail. And so the approach that we've decided on as an agency is to proceed with setting up our program sort of in a vacuum. And then when we get guidance from the US Department of Energy, we can do what we need to do with these soon to be existing programs, either making changes to them, or if we need to have some sort of different legislation or different program, then we can deal with that when the time comes. So that's our general approach there. We have not been able to find out an exact timeline for when those Inflation Reduction Act dollars will be available. I heard an estimate this morning from somebody connected to Congress that they thought it would be between a year and 2 years. So it's not something that's necessarily going to happen very soon. Part of the reason, for those who don't know, the U.S. Department of Energy also got a lot of money from the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, which passed last November. So they're dealing with those programs and all that new work first, and then IRA. So just sort of know that we know this is coming. We're mindful of how they'll interact, but we just don't know yet. So for the time being, we're just building the program the way that we need to build it to work with what is existing right now. So with that, I will move us on, and I'll keep an eye out again for questions in the chat or hands up throughout. And as I transition between slides, I'm happy to grab any questions that come up. The Community Heat Pump Deployment Program is the first one that I'll talk about today. This is a program that's based on grants that are actually going to be provided to regional entities. We're calling them regional administrators. And then they are the ones who will administer the program or work with the folks that are actually putting in the heat pumps. They'll provide financial assistance, and that can be in different forms, depending on the program that regional entity chooses to have. So that's loans, grants, rebates, incentives. And then also the money, whatever that financial assistance looks like, it's to support the purchase and installation of heat pumps and related upgrades. That's a big deal because sometimes when people go to put a heat pump in their home, they find out that they need upgrades to other aspects of their electrical system, for example, in order to support that heat pump installation. The total budget for this program is $10 million. And in a minute, I'm going to flip over and share sort of a map of Oregon that shows there's 11 different regions in which there will be administrators or could be administrators. And how that money gets divvied up across the regions is also written into the bill. And it includes factors like population in that region, but it also includes other factors like energy burden. So if it's an area that has a particularly high number of people experiencing energy burden, or if there's particular climate constraints, like it's a colder climate or a warmer climate in the summers. I'm going to talk about the regional entities right now, Camilo, so just hang tight. And then if you have any specific questions, I'll grab them after the next 2 slides when we're talking about the regional entities. So as I mentioned, there are 11 regions in the state. This is a map of those regions. The regions are based on Oregon's economic development districts, which are in statute. For those who are familiar with Oregon's Regional Solutions Program, this is that same exact set of boundaries. And you can see they use county lines, and then they cluster certain counties together to create these different regions. So we'll have grants for each region. We can also offer grants for federally recognized energy tribes, Indian tribes. And then you can kind of see how these regions are portioned out on the map. And hopefully, different climates will match better, although you'll see some of the coastal areas are kind of matched up more inland. So we'll be kind of dealing with differences like that as needed. And then next up, what entities are allowed to apply to be regional administrators? And this is the list from the statute. It includes local governments, local housing authorities, nonprofit organizations, as I mentioned, federally recognized Indian tribes. And then it gets to some other more specific type of entities. Coordinated care organizations, they generally are healthcare providers in the state. Community action agencies, they already administer some heat pump and energy efficiency programs in the state. Manufactured dwelling park nonprofit cooperatives, and finally electric utilities. These are all eligible to apply. So Camilo, if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them now. The way that we'll go about selecting these is the agency will put together a request for proposal from eligible entities off of this list for the regions, and then we'll do a review process in order to determine which particular application is the strongest for that region. And I'm going to take you, well, I'm going to have Patricia take you off mute, Camila. There you go. You should be able to talk now.
The regional administrators are functioning at the county level, so when things get organized, we'll go to our county government, most likely.
No, you'll go to this eligible entity. So it's not by county. If you look at this region, you can sort of see there's county maps, but the shading is how the regions are determined. So for example, if you look at Eastern Oregon, there's like that pale orange color where La Grande is. There's 3 counties there that make up one region. And then from there, whoever gets the, whoever is selected by the agency to be the regional administrator, and it'll be one of these, if you see now, one of these sorts of entities. So somebody could reach out to us and we could be like, oh, you should contact ABC nonprofit that is the Region 1 administrator. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yep.
One more question. When will we find out who's got this responsibility and for the administration?
Yeah, we're aiming to have those requests for proposals out early in the new year. And then we'll be having that review process, as we mentioned, with selection. We're hoping to have selection done and those programs up and running in time for the cooling season next year. Thank you for the great questions. All right, I will move us on, but if anyone has any other questions, as you can see, just raise your hand, I'll grab you, or feel free to put something in the chat and we're keeping tabs there. So while each regional administrator will be setting up programs that will work best for their region and figuring out the details of what will work best for their customer base, there are some requirements in the bill that must be consistent across all programs. And one of those is the prioritization of financial assistance. First, the financial assistance will be prioritized for what's defined in statute as environmental justice communities. So this means that in Oregon law, there's this term, environmental justice communities, and that particular term includes a lot of different communities around the state. It includes communities of color, communities with a lot of immigrants, communities that are lower income. It includes rural communities, coastal communities, and there's even a longer list from there. So that's one piece. And then also prioritization is applied for individuals who rely on bulk fuels. So I put a couple of images up here of the type of bulk fuels we're talking about with the oil tank or the wood stove. So heating oil, wood stove, propane are examples of bulk fuels. And then also electric resistance heating. And that's that kind of old school, pretty beat up baseboard heater that you'll see that picture of. And the reason that electric resistance is on this list is because it is considered very inefficient. It's actually a very expensive way to heat a home. And paradoxically, that's kind of a big word, sorry, but it's often in homes where lower income folks live. So you don't want the folks who have the least income to have the least efficient and most expensive heat system. So that's why that's prioritized, and bulk fuels are prioritized for either public health or greenhouse gas emissions considerations, among some energy cost concerns. And then the other prioritized category is individuals who reside in a home or structure that don't have functioning heating or cooling, whether it's fallen into disrepair or it was just built without an adequate heating or cooling system. So I will then call on my colleague James, thanks James, who's going to talk a little bit about the rebate amounts that we're considering right now.
Yeah, so we are planning on establishing a maximum dollar amount in the administrative rules, and it's going to kind of mimic the numbers that we're talking about in the rental program, and we'll flash to that side up later on. But it's going to be in the range of 4,000 ish to as a maximum cap up to 100% of the cost for the purchase and installation of the heat pump, with additional cap for related upgrades. And the regional entities, when they're applying, will be able to kind of propose, if they want to, kind of some ability to kind of customize that for their region as well. So they might offer a lower base, but then build it up for some of the higher efficiency or pieces. So the idea is that we'll set a higher end and then allow the regional entities to customize it within, propose to how they're going to customize it for their region, and we'll kind of be able to show you some of the similarities with the other program in terms of the max levels when we get to that slide. Yeah, thanks, Chrissy.
Yeah, no problem. Does anyone have any questions? Right, if someone wants to unmute. Ivan, go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Is it primarily rebate only?
So the community heat pump deployment program, the regional entities can decide what different types of financial assistance they want to offer. In a second, I'm going to talk about a different program where it's limited to essentially rebates.
Okay. So it's possible that the entities may provide it upfront for this one, for this program, but then maybe like the rental one is rebate only, probably.
Yeah, I'll talk about that one in a sec, but yeah, that's correct. And then we have a question that I'm going to call on James for from Jim Balderas in the chat. Is the cap the same for single family and multifamily?
So, I'm sorry.
Shall I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Camilo, and then we'll come back to Jim's question.
You alluded to this question before about coordination between federal and state agencies. I'm wondering what you could anticipate, whether or not there's going to be one system of applying for rebates, or would a consumer have to apply to both state and federal when the organization has the plans prepared?
Good question. We anticipate that the federal program will be run through the states, and so hopefully we'll be able to have a uniform system that wouldn't require someone to apply to our agency twice. I will admit that there are other ways to get money for heat pumps in the state right now that are not exactly going to be that neat. Won't be one application, for example, but we are working with those other entities. For example, the Oregon Housing and Community Services has a program. Also the Energy Trust of Oregon, also utilities. So we're working with all of these entities to try to make it as easy as possible for folks to apply to our, to get our dollars as well. But just know that the coordination and the streamlining is something that's on our mind, and I think will take some time to get right. But on the federal one, that one shouldn't be as much of a trick.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so Jim's question was, is the cap the same for single family and multifamily?
Thanks. So the community heat pump deployment program is going to be aimed at individuals who reside in the regions for the entities. So it's going to be kind of targeted at those owner-occupied dwellings, and the cap will be the same as whether it's a single family dwelling or it's a dwelling unit in a multifamily structure. But the kind of rental side, the landlord of a rental unit will be able to apply to the rental program that Chrissy's going to talk about in a moment. And so that'll be a separate program they'll apply to. I hope that answers the question, Jim.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to the that slide that's for the renters program. Great. I forgot to say, because I know we have somebody that's on the phone, that if you want to raise your hand, you can press *3, and to come off mute, it'll be *6. So just so you know, I meant to say that early on. All right, we have another question in the chat, and that's from Paul. Hi, Paul. Will there be an allocation formula to distribute funds to each region? And the answer is there will be an allocation formula. It's in the bill. I mentioned it earlier, and I just named a couple of the different criteria that are in the bill, but it includes population, area, energy burden, the climate of an area, depending on if there's particular heating or cooling needs that need to be addressed, among some other factors. So that's in the bill, and it will be something the agency determines after we know if there's administrators for every region, is my understanding of when we'll make that decision. And I will move us on. So the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program is a separate program. It has different everything, not quite everything, but has different lots of things. This is a program that will be administered by the Department of Energy. Some of you on the line might be familiar with the Oregon Solar and Storage Rebate Program. That's another program that our agency administers. And this program was built off of that one, which we have found to be a program that we're administering with a lot of success. So we thought that it would be great to use what's working already and build off of that. And this is a program that is, by its name, hopefully you can tell, designed to support projects and rental homes. And it includes basically rebates and grants for the financial assistance side versus perhaps loans or something else like that. So it's limited. And then to that one category, or kind of two categories. And then dollars can be used to purchase and install heat pumps and also carry out related upgrades again. So if you go to install a heat pump and find out that you need a new electrical panel to do that, that's the sort of thing that there'll be dollars available in this program. And then financial assistance, as I mentioned, is available for owners of rental units. And then also for those folks who own a manufactured dwelling or RV, but rent a space in a manufactured dwelling or RV park also qualify under this program. And the rebates are for contractors. And then this is how our solar rebate program works too. What that means is that the contractor is who applies for the rebate. This means that it's an upfront savings for the, in this case, landlord or the owner of that manufactured dwelling that they're renting space for. So the idea is that it creates upfront savings. You have a lower amount from the beginning, and then at the end of the day, the check gets written to the contractor, who also do all that application work. So we have found that to work quite well and be easier for homeowners. And then the $15 million budget is allotted for this particular program. As far as why it's a different amount than the other one, I'm not sure. And there's a question in the chat, is this exclusive to ductless heat pumps? And it's not. The bill is pretty open on different types of heat pumps, just depending on the use, the need for the space. So in this case, the statute has some things to say about the rebate level. It can be up to 60% of the purchase price of a heat pump for an owner of a rental unit. And then we get to decide and rule what the cap or top level of toward the purchase of a heat pump that will work for the owners of manufactured dwellings. And then the bill also has some preferences. They're different from the ones in the other program, but in this case, we are to give preference for providing rebates for low to moderate income residential tenants, and then for heat pumps with superior energy efficiency. So you'll see in just a second that we've designed sort of different tiers related to these two groups in order to reflect that prioritization so far. So before I go over to the next slide, I do see a couple questions in the chat here. So I'll go ahead and we'll go through those, and then we'll talk a little bit about the rebate amounts. So owner-occupied multifamily lives in one unit and rents the other. Would I do one program for my unit and the other for the rented unit? James, is that one for you?
Yeah, I think obviously we're still kind of drafting these rules, but kind of as we're thinking about it, that would kind of be the allocation as it is, just because we have these two pots and we're trying to allocate them as best we can. So owner-occupied would be kind of the regional program, and then if you own a rental property, you would apply for that other one because it's a separate dwelling space that you would be eligible for a separate incentive for.
Yeah. Ivan, I think you probably have a follow-up, so maybe we can take them off mute and then we'll get to the other questions.
Yeah, so if I'm following you correctly, that is, again, it's a duplex. I live in one side and I rent the other side, to a tenant. And so it is, even though it's the same structure, because I live in one, I would do the community heat pump program from mine because I live in it and we have electric, heating. And then for the other one, because I am a landlord, I would use the rental home heat pump program for the rented unit. So it would be totally separate.
I think that's as we're
It's
got
like
it
kind of
designed.
funky, yeah, to have 2 units, but it's the same structure. So
If it's 2 kind of primary living spaces, so you have one living space for yourself, and then it's a separate primary living space for tenants, which is kind of heated and cooled by a separate system. I think that would be a separate residential structure dwelling that we not structure, but a separate residential dwelling that would be eligible through the rental program.
okay, and it is pretty down the line. So yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ivan. And then Jim had a question. Is there a specific reason why manufactured homes are included in this program and not the other? And I'm going to let either James or Stephanie about that one. I don't know. Are they necessarily excluded from the other one?
So they're not necessarily excluded from the other one. So the key in this is the rental piece. So manufactured dwellings that are on a rented space can qualify under the rental program. And then manufactured homes that are not on a rented space, so that kind of owner occupied residential, single family residential category of manufactured homes would fall under the regional program.
Thanks. And then Cody, I'm getting ready to talk about the rebate and the ratings, so hang tight. And I'll also talk about, or actually James is going to talk about it, when we expect the programs to roll out. I'm also going to say that at the end, but we're aiming for both programs to be started up, kind of kicked off early in the new year. That's our goal. So James, I'm going to flip to the next slide for you.
Thanks, Christy. So this is a kind of our tentative proposal. Still getting feedback on it, and then we'll kind of be crafting draft rules shortly, and we'll be getting feedback on it during the rule making process as well. But we're initially thinking about having kind of separate tiers for different rebates amounts. You would have the base level, which would be set at the federal minimum efficiency standards that will be new in start 2023, and we'll get into what those are kind of in a moment. And that would be kind of that baseline, that first figure for non-income restricted and that baseline efficiency. And then we're thinking of having a higher tier amount for income restricted. So those rental units that serve low or moderate income individuals, or manufactured home RV homeowners that are low or moderate income. There would be a higher incentive, and then also having another 2 tiers above that, which is like the higher efficiency for non-income restricted and a higher efficiency with income restriction. So like with a lower moderate income eligibility, which would be that highest end, that 4,000 up to 60% of the total cost. So it's kind of like a range to kind of to prioritize those kind of low moderate those heat pumps that are serving low moderate income individuals, and those that have a higher efficiency, while still having that baseline incentive for those that meet just the minimum federal efficiency standards and are not benefiting a lower moderate income households. And so because we have the ability to set a higher percentage, we have that for the manufactured homes, we have that 80% at the high end for the manufactured homes. And then we also have those different tiers for ductless, ducted, and also ground source heat pumps. And then at your bottom, you'll also note that there's a kind of a our initial bounds for related upgrades, where the bottom end is those that are not income restricted, and then the higher end at 4,000 is the load that would be serving the low to moderate income individual. I'll just look at some of these questions one moment.
Good. We have one from Jason. That's how do you determine income in a rental property? Is that based on the tenant or the area? Have we decided on that one yet? I know we wanted to talk to Oregon Housing and Community Services again on that.
Yes, we're still looking for input on that. We would be kind of looking for, in terms of the landlord, it's a unit that is serving a low or moderate income households. But how we actually assess that, we're still seeking input on. So if people have thoughts or experience with that, we welcome input now or through email after as well.
Yeah, and Jeremy had a similar question. So we're open to input on that. So Jeremy, if you have thoughts on, or Jason, thoughts on how we should approach getting that income. And we, generally speaking, for our solar rebate program, just to give an example, we do ask for tax transcripts from the year before, see if folks qualified for certain programs. So we tend to not do the attestation-based version, but do some sort of getting some information from folks. And then we had another question that is a lot of acronyms for me, Stephanie. I hope you're ready. How do you expect to get a heat pump with an AHRI matchup with the new SEER2, HSPF2, et cetera, for 5K? I think part of it is we don't expect the rebate to cover the entire cost of the heat pump, because those start at $7,500 plus. So any comments or thoughts on that, Stephanie?
Yes, I would agree that kind of this program is designed to be, as James mentioned, kind of 40 to 60% of total cost for the non-lower moderate income portion, or 40 to 80% of the cost if it is so, or yeah, some variation thereof. But we're looking at this program as something that's going to layer in with the other existing programs. So like, ideally, we would see somebody come in and be able to utilize their local utility or energy trust incentives. This program potentially in the future will add on federal tax credits or federal dollars, and kind of have all those pieces work together. So we're looking at this as a partial incentive, not something that should be covering 100% of the cost. However, we're looking at covering more of the cost when we are serving lower moderate income tenants, or in the community program where we're serving those regional administrators will be doing a similar effort in providing higher incentive dollars for their priorities.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. And we have two hands up. I'm not sure which one was up first, but we'll start with Camilo.
Yes, thank you. Since both the federal and the state programs don't begin until 2023, does that mean the homeowner would have to wait in order to contract to install one, or would one that got started in the fall be eligible still?
We think that there's room for, in the community program, the first one we talked to, for the regional administrators to make a decision about possibly allowing for incentives to be retroactive. In the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program, it's actually not allowed in the statute. It says that you have to apply before installation in order to qualify. So there might be some wiggle room on the community programs. We just don't know what those communities will aim to do. And just as a reminder, we don't know when the federal incentive programs will be online. It could be in 2023, it might not, it could be later than that, but there are new tax credits coming on that are an elevated tax credit amount comes online in the new year. And that's one where we don't have to wait for a whole program to be set up by the federal government. And then we can go to Ivan.
Thank you. That's super helpful, Camilo, to know that the rental one is not retroactive. Super helpful. Forgive me if I missed this, but for the, gosh, I didn't lose my question. Oh yeah, for the rental home heat pump program, is it, the tenant, it's their income. So, if I'm like applying for this on their behalf, they'll provide their income, or are they supposed to apply? Like, so who applies for it essentially?
The contractor actually is the one who applies for the rental home program. And then that the details of how that will work for the regional programs, I think, will need to be determined by the regions. But the income amount in the rental program, it's actually something we are trying to figure out because we, like I said, as James was also saying, we are still like interested in how people think we ought to do that.
Okay.
Housing and Community Services, another state agency, they have a way of doing income verification for renters. So we are hoping to learn from them.
Right. Like Portland Housing Center here, like that's how I actually got this property. They're very good at working with low income folks. If you, for this region, definitely keep them in mind. But yeah, so to fully understand, the contractor is the one that's, what are the layers here? So
yeah, the contractor applies for the renters program. And again, the other program, the details will be determined by those community regional administrators.
okay.
But for the renters program, the contractors apply. And that way it's upfront savings for the homeowner or landlord in this particular case. So for example, instead of, I'm just going to say a random amount, don't read into it. I'm using something I can do math with really easily. But if you had a $10,000 bid for the heat pump that you were getting, and we were providing a $3,000 incentive, then your contractor would apply, and the contractor would, in their contract with you, be charging you $7,000.
Okay.
Instead of 10, and then you getting the money later. And then the contractors who we write the check to later. And what it does for us is it makes it a really efficient program. We actually run our solar and storage rebate program with a lot less staff than is typical for incentive programs. And that's because they're working with contractors who are kind of coming through the door quite often with applications. So they know how the process works.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so we kind of have like the experts in the weeds with us on the contracts versus dealing with folks who've like never before dealt with government to get an incentive, right? Yeah. So we do have some questions in the chat. Let's see, where were we? Drew asked the question of the day for me. This is what keeps me up at night. How will this program integrate with the weatherization programs at OHCS? We've been talking to them. We'll continue talking with them. But yeah, we're still figuring out exactly how that will work. Just know that it's absolutely our intention to try to make it as easy as possible for people to work within the framework of both programs. There's also utility incentives. And so we're also very cognizant of making sure our program also works with those. So it's definitely a bit of a tightrope. Jeremy noted on the self-reported. Cody asked about duct testing and sealing. So why don't we go to the next slide, and then we'll move on with the rest of the questions in the chat after this next slide, because I think that is a good way to answer the next questions. I think James and Stephanie are the experts here. So James, go ahead.
Yeah, so we'll be looking to match the federal minimum standards that are coming in January 1st. And so that includes the new test standards, the HSBF2 and the SEER 2 standards. That is a requirement in the community program, and we're looking to kind of match that and be consistent in the rental program. And since the programs are both looking to start to kind of be online in the new year, that's kind of where we're going to be looking to match. We're also speaking with BPA in terms of how they're adopting the new standards, and we've started discussions with ETO as well. In terms of that higher incentive tier that I talked about just previously, we're looking for that to be like a 10 to 15% efficiency increase over those federal minimums, depending on the type of like ductless, ducted, ground source. And so that's kind of where we're looking to go with the efficiency standards. In terms of stuff like the commissioning requirements, we're still looking for feedback on that as we're putting together this draft, these draft rules. We have been speaking with, as I said, BPA and PTO about their requirements, but this is kind of the rental side is statewide, so we're having to make sure that we're trying to be consistent and being able to set requirements that are allow individuals to apply for multiple incentives, and so keeping that balance between quality as well as keeping the eligibility for the incentives and financial offerings open. But we are definitely looking for feedback on what people feel like are key project requirements for the installation of heat pumps regarding stuff like duct testing or anything like that. And if you would like to follow up again, like I said, I'd be happy to take comments in an email as well if you'd rather send feedback that way.
Great, thanks. And at the end of the slide deck, we'll have James's email address if anyone wants to write anything up on that or any other topic. I wanted to just remind the folks that are on the phone that if they would like to also engage, you can press *3 to raise your hand, and then after we call on you, *6 to unmute. So just know that that's a possibility if you're on the phone. I don't see any hands up right now. I'm going to go to sort of the next question in the queue. Jason was asking, how long is a contractor waiting to get paid on a job? The way our solar rebate program works is when the contractors tell us they're done with the job, and we sometimes we have like some level of going out and checking to make sure that the project is installed. Not every project, but like a sampling. And so essentially, we just are ready to move really fast whenever we get those requests in. And so we generally pay pretty quickly as soon as the project is completed. And we actually don't really often get complaints from contractors that they're waiting a long time for them to get paid for that job once it's complete. And we would hope to mimic that same result in this program. It's part of the reason we went with this approach when we were asked what we thought might work for our agency. Here's one for Stephanie or James. Is there a limit for how many zones someone can install, or is this a single zone option only?
I'll jump in on that one. So the bill itself does not limit us on this topic. However, it is something that we have been talking about in terms of in the rulemaking, we can set requirements. So if you have specific feedback on this topic, we would love to hear it. But currently it's open to a multi-zone heat pump system, but we're not looking at having a big difference in the incentive values for those larger systems. So kind of current planning is that we would still incentivize those types of installations. It would just be a lower percentage of the total cost.
Great, thanks. I'm going to go to the questions from you slide just so folks can kind of start thinking about what we especially want to get input from you on. And then I'll keep going in with the questions in the chat. We have at least a few more here. So Connor's asking about retroactivity of upgrades. So is the related upgrades rebate, i.e. new electrical system or similar, applicable to 2022 installs, or only upgrades directly in tandem with 2023 plus heat pump installs? And the answer on that one is same for the actual heat pumps. So if it's in the community deployment program and that administrator chooses to allow for retroactivity in their process, then that could work out. In the renters program, again, until the application has been approved or submitted, that's when that program can move forward. So the application has to be put in before install under our program, and that would include the upgrades. And James or Stephanie could correct me if I'm out of line there, but I think it's the same for the heat pumps and the other work. And then let's see, is the state funding that was described, I haven't read this one yet, so I'm not sure what it's for. Is the state funding that was described dependent on the utility that the applicant uses? It is not. So anybody can apply between IOUs, COUs. This is a statewide program. And then Jim is wondering, is there an expectation to decommission the older system? I believe the answer on that is no, you can keep the older system. And it doesn't matter what the fuel is on that older system either. And then Camilo, since programs are administered locally for just the community deployment program only, will there be a centralized source of information, or do we have to look at different levels for answers to questions? The answer on that one is it will be region by region, and the details for the community deployment program, for the rental home program, it will all be the same because it's statewide and administered by us only. And here's one this is a new one, I think. This is for Stephanie or James. Can you require a certain amount of labor warranty from contractors?
It's something that we'd be happy to take comment on from people if they have specific thoughts on whether there should be a requirement. The bill is open to the project requirements that we kind of put into rule. It's something that we thought about, but we seek comment on what people felt if they thought there should be some workmanship warranty or anything.
Great. And then, oh, go ahead. Someone else saying something? Okay, just imagining. Okay. And then Ivan, I think, was following up on my question about the regional administrators. I'm going to scroll back on my screen. Just put up with me for a second. So as a reminder, this is a map of the regions in which there can be administrators. So you can see here, like the different, I wish that the state map didn't like use these same colors. They're trying to show how there's like these regions. But there's 11 regions up here on this map. So that's where the 11 regional administrators that there will sometime be. If some federally recognized tribes choose to also have their own programs, that could increase the number above 11. It's my understanding, depending on if the tribe chooses to use that approach or applies to be a regional administrator themselves. So there is some way that it could be above 11 is my understanding, but we don't necessarily expect it. So I'll go back to the questions. Oops, sorry, I went a little too far. All right, so let's see. Jeremy wants to know if contractors will need to apply for ODO approval at a contractor or project level before offering the incentives. Are we talking about doing approved contractors?
There will be kind of they'll need to kind of be on the approved contractor list and be able to kind of get into the system to reserve a rebate, and the rebate reservation has to be submitted before the installation is the requirements.
And this again is a reminder, we're mimicking this off of our solar rebate program, and we have 37 approved contractors around the state that we work with for that program. And it seems like it's a pretty simple process to me to apply to be an approved contractor. So I don't believe it will be too onerous, and we don't get a lot of complaints about that process from our contractors. Cody has just a comment that says her parts, which I might be related to the warranty question. And then it happens all the time. Low income gets the program, then a fix 4 years later costs $1,500 and they can't afford it. So he's suggesting as a comment that it should be 10-year parts and labor. So thanks for that. Ivan, yes, 1 administrator per region. I have now gotten through the questions in the chat. So hopefully folks that are, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to jump in on the 1 administrator per region. It does allow for those administrators to partner with other organizations within their region, but it would be 1 primary applicant.
Right. And I think we would be wanting it to be one way to like apply. But there's the reason we have that is that if an electric utility chooses, their boundaries don't follow county lines neatly, and other electric utilities don't really want this other electric utility working in their region. So we needed to come up with some way for that to work. So the idea would be there would still be like 1 central sort of way to make that work or apply as a customer. So Ivan, I just saw your hand up and then it went down, but maybe because we answered your question. Thanks for the clarification, Steph. That was great. All right, so I'll go. I guess I somehow toggled back by accident. Sorry about that. Here you go. So these were the questions that we had for you all, and you've been answering them throughout our time together. But if anyone has thoughts on technical requirements, what works well about existing programs or challenges you've seen, that question of how to fit the programs together, we love hearing feedback on that, or any other issues or factors on your mind. And then if someone wants to unmute Ivan, I'd love to hear what he'd like to say. Go ahead, Ivan.
Yeah, super random one. I've been talking to friends about who've had them installed, and just on a technical requirement, I've heard about contractors that will try to install ones that are rated for like really warm climates and not necessarily for the Northwest. And so like they wouldn't kick on until like a certain degree. And so I just want to make sure that like when contractors are being selected, that, you know, they're fit to have, you know, the heat pumps that they're providing are actually good for this region.
Yep. Great comment. Thank you. Drew? And Drew, I'll let you know when you're off mute. Go ahead. Does someone want to unmute Drew?
Oh, can you guys hear
There
me?
you go, Drew. Now you can. Now you can go
Sorry
ahead.
about that. I was curious about coordination with BPA. You know, they have like a qualified product list for making sure that the heat pumps that are used can be used for a bunch of different programs. Is there going to be some cross coordination with that type of that end of things?
We've talked to them. We plan on continuing to talk to them to make sure that our programs line up. Does anybody want to answer that more specifically? Or do we have a more specific answer right now?
We don't have a more specific answer other than the fact that we need to make sure that the program works across the state. So obviously there may be other programs that we need to kind of match up with. But definitely looking to coordinate with BPA where we can.
Yeah, it would just be good. I mean, as far as like, you know, cross pollination between weatherization and like the work that BPA is already doing, just making sure that the qualified products that we're suggesting to be used across these different programs is going to help make it easier to utilize these rebates.
That's great. Yeah, we can take a look at that list. See if we could have something like that or point to theirs or whatever. We'll take a closer look.
Thank you.
Thanks. Let's see. Jeremy wants to know if we've considered an incentive tier for extended capacity heat pumps versus traditional. Stephanie, do you know?
I was not entirely sure what you mean by extended capacity, but typically when we're looking at higher efficiency models, we're looking at models that have either dual speed compressors or variable speed, or, you know, kind of additional factors that would make them more efficient are often also increasing their capacity and their suitability to operate at multiple temperatures. So, oh, and does not rely on backup heat once the outside temp. Okay. So yes, that's kind of another factor is we're looking at trying to ensure that the installations that do get installed as part of this program aren't going to wind up relying on electric resistance backup inside the heat pump, and in turn increase those utility costs for residents. So yes, that's something that we are thinking about and trying to make sure that, as I said, that, you know, this doesn't wind up costing especially our low income residents that we're trying to help through this program, trying not to cost them additional money down the road that they can't afford.
So the question, I think we've got time for the last two because I think they're quick ones. I popped up the what's next slide just mid conversation here so folks know we are aiming to kick off our formal rulemaking program in a little over a month. And we're aiming, as I mentioned earlier, for our programs to open in early 2023. You can see here James's email address, and we would love to hear from you if you have further comments after this conversation. It's obvious we have experts on the line, and we really do want to hear from you. And then, are there heat pump incentive programs in place now in Oregon? Raylan, the answer is that there are through your utilities, or if you're in PGE or Pacific Power or anywhere that has an investor-owned utility territory, then Idaho Power as well, then you can go to the Energy Trust of Oregon, and they do have a heat pump incentive program. And then there's also some for low-income Oregonians through Oregon Housing and Community Services. And then Camilo's question is, does he have to wait for a local administrator to be established before he, as a Portland homeowner, will know where to apply for support? And the answer to that question is yes. So we're trying to get to that point as quick as we possibly can. We've got you in mind. But the bill is written the way the bill is written, so we have to follow that plan. And then once that, will help connect people to those regional administrators once that happens. And Jim ended with that he has some concerns about manufactured home, folks who rent the space navigating the application process. And I encourage you to send your thoughts on to James, or I can stay on longer and hear from you if you want to raise your hand and we can take you off mute. But otherwise, if folks, it's 2 o'clock, like our time here is done. So if you have anything else that you'd like to share, I'll stick around for a couple of minutes here with anybody who wants to chat. Or James's email address is there, and we'd love to hear from you. Raylan, we'll take you're off mute now. Raylan?
Hi, I just was wondering what is the typical, what's the income base that they work from?
For Energy Trust or the utilities, I think they work with anybody in their territory. And Oregon Housing and Community Services, does somebody know it's generally low income. Does anybody know their definition of low income?
It differs for the different programs. I think for one of the programs, it's 60% of the area median income, and yeah, Drew just put in there 200. The other program is 200% of the federal poverty limit. Those are the LIHEAP and the weatherization programs.
LIHEAP is low income rate relief, right?
Okay.
Or Bill.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
I was going to say, and then moderate income is not super well defined, but it would be something above those kind of low income definitions.
Drew, can somebody take Drew off mute? Drew, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, thanks for sticking
great.
around for extra questions. Appreciate it. Yeah, you started off the hour talking about how the heat dome was kind of what prompted a lot of the legislation to go through. But this, I'm just being extra clear for my own sake. This is not AC only, right? We're talking about.
It's not AC at all.
Okay, all right, fantastic. And
Yeah.
and there's no requirement on. It didn't sound like you have to remove the old equipment, and it's not like a electric only type situation. You could potentially install heat pumps in gas houses, is what you're saying.
Yep.
Wow, cool.
Yep. Which is what I have. So it's kind of nice. I got to get asked questions about it by a legislator and got to be like, I have this and it works great. When it's really cold, my furnace kicks on, my gas furnace, but I have a heat
Is it a
pump.
dual fuel heat pump that you have, or is it you have a ductless heat pump?
I have an electric. I don't have a ductless heat pump. I have an electric heat pump, like ground source, I think. And then
Okay.
I have a gas furnace.
Okay.
That's like an older gas furnace that they just left in, and twice or 3 times a year or something, it pops on.
Okay. All right, great. I work at the Oregon Training Institute, and so we do a lot of work with the low income program, the weatherization program. So this sounds like it could be a cool opportunity to leverage more funding to get some more heat pumps into some people's houses, maybe without even the burden of a fuel switch. So that sounds cool.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks, Drew.
Great, thanks.
Anybody else have any other questions for us? All right, well, unless anyone else has anything, we'll go, but you can see that email address there for James. Feel free to follow up with him anytime as we go through this process. And we're really grateful to those of you still on the line and also to my coworkers. Thank you so much for another heat pump public meeting. All right, I'm gonna go stop sharing my screen. Bye.
Yes, Christine, bye.
Yeah, of course.